Last night, of course, it was revealed that the draft text had been agreed between the UK and the EU on the UK's separation from the European Union, and the political fallout is well underway. I suspect I know the answer to the opening question, but for the record, is the Cabinet Secretary able to tell us whether or not the Welsh Government has had sight of the draft text, and has there been a conversation between the Prime Minister and the First Minister on the contents of that draft text, either overnight or today?
Neither the Welsh nor the Scottish Government have had advanced sight of the text so far. I was in London yesterday for the latest meeting of the Joint Ministerial Committee on European negotiations, and was able to discuss the content of the agreement, the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration, and indeed the explainer document that is to be published alongside it, with the Deputy Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and with Scottish ministers as well. I understand that the First Minister is speaking with the Prime Minister later this afternoon.
I thank him for that answer, and of course yet again it's disappointing that the so-called respect agenda, one that the Cabinet Secretary himself said that he hoped would begin as a result of the agreement between his government and the UK government on the withdrawal bill, that we would see a shift in attitudes and patterns towards discussions with devolved administrations, and again Wales seems to be treated with the same old content. Apparently there are reports that the government of Gibraltar have had sight of the text. I wonder if he could confirm whether that is indeed the case, and whether he thinks it's acceptable for one government, not even in the United Kingdom, to have sight of the draft text, and for governments within the UK not to. And I appreciate the fact that without the detail, it's very difficult to be specific, but one of the rumours emanating from the draft text so far is that under the draft text, Northern Ireland will remain effectively in the EU single market for goods. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that that would give Northern Ireland an unfair competitive advantage, making Wales less attractive for inward investment? And if so, isn't that basis enough for the Welsh Government to oppose the draft withdrawal agreement?
As Steffan Lewis said, I'm yet to see either the withdrawal agreement draft or the political declaration, and I don't think it is sensible for me to speculate on aspects that may or may not be included in it when we do get to see it. Nor, I'm afraid, do I have any knowledge of whether the Government of Gibraltar has had any additional insight into the content of the documents. What I can say is that both I and Mike Russell, on behalf of the Scottish Government, made the first point that he made, and made it forcefully, with UK ministers yesterday. Other governments of the United Kingdom ought to see these documents before they are concluded and discussed at the UK Cabinet level, not afterwards.
I appreciate again that the lack of detail does make things difficult, but we do have a clear indication of many aspects, and of course we are able to use the Welsh Government's own position in securing Wales's future, and to contrast it and compare it with what we do know from the draft text as things stand. We know Wales will not have full participation in the single market. We know we will not maintain our membership of the EU Customs Union. And we know that Northern Ireland apparently will effectively be staying in the single market, and that is likely that a new customs border will therefore appear in the Irish Sea, with bad consequences for Wales. In addition to all of this, the detail and the actual ground consequences, politically, nobody wants this deal. No Remainer wants this deal. No Leaver wants this deal. Nobody wants what is apparently on offer. There is no mandate from anywhere or anyone for this form of Brexit. And the political context here in Wales, of course, is very important. The Cabinet Secretary in the next few weeks may well become the most senior elected Labour politician in the United Kingdom. What he thinks and what he says, and his clarity on this matter, are very, very important indeed, and will have lasting consequences. So can he tell us whether or not his own position is changing on this matter? Will he now finally come out and say that the only way to resolve this mess and avoid a bigger mess and a disaster is through a referendum of the people? No more pointless general elections, no more repeated parliamentary impasses, but a people's vote to resolve this and avoid disaster.
Well, Where I do agree with what Steffan Lewis said is in the initial point that he made, that the tests that we will apply to this agreement are the tests that we set out in the white paper that we published jointly with Plaid Cymru, Securing Wales's Future. He has not seen the agreement, and neither have I. But he wants to draw conclusions without seeing it. I'm not in the position to do that, but the test that he outlined, whether it involves our continued participation in a customs union, whether it gives us full and unfettered access to the single market, whether it includes a sensible resolution on migration, all of the tests that we set out in that document are the tests that I will apply when we have sight of the agreement itself. He has drawn some conclusions as to what the outcome of that will be, and I dare say there will be people who say that his conclusions are not unreasonable. But I will wait to see the document, and then I will apply the tests that we jointly agreed ought to be applied to any form of leaving the European Union. Where I don't agree with him is that there is only one way in which all of this could be resolved. The first way it could be resolved is for the Prime Minister to do a deal that does measure up to the tests that we have set out for her. A deal of that sort was there to be done. That's why we set it out in our document. If the agreement, when we see it, does pass the tests that we have set, then we would no doubt wish to support it. So it could be resolved in that way. If the Prime Minister does not do a deal of that sort, and if she is not able to secure support for her deal on the floor of the House of Commons, then of course there should be a general election. The House of Commons will have failed to discharge the most significant responsibility that will lie at its feet during this Assembly term, during this parliamentary term. And in any previous set of circumstances, a government that fails to secure support for its most significant course of action would go back to the country and allow the country to decide in a general election. Now, the member will say, and I heard other people saying it, that that won't happen. Well, nothing can be written out of a script, given the febrile state of politics around this issue. If there is no general election, then I agree with him. Then there must be a people's vote. If the House of Commons cannot resolve it, and there is no general election, then a third way must be found. And in those circumstances, I agree with him. The decision must go back to the people, and the people must be allowed to decide.